Good morning, my name is Ewing, and today I will be discussing my presentation on makeup inclusivity through TikTok. The beauty industry has a very long history of lacking inclusive products, especially when it comes to Black women. Most products being produced were skin whitening or bleaching creams designed to enhance beauty while also being packed of really harmful ingredients like corticosteroids and mercury. These can lead to a lot of issues like gastrointestinal, renal, and neurological toxicities. Even so, the National Library of Medicine found that the global skin whitening market was expected to be about $15.7 billion by 2030, with women of color making up 80% of worldwide sales. Because of this ongoing issue, Black women often feel lower levels of self-compassion and feelings of alienation, knowing that their skin color has been frowned upon in the beauty industry and has been for so long, overall supporting the need for this issue to be addressed more thoroughly. So that really quickly led me to develop my research question, because I knew that I wanted to focus on how Black women challenge this adversity and what they do to go against it. So I wanted to approach this through online forms of activism. So my question is, how do Black female TikTok advocates use marketing strategies to promote inclusivity in makeup, and what patterns of audience engagement emerge from these strategies? I hypothesize that positive-based strategies will generate more engagement because of the use of multiple emotions and atmospheres that draw in users more frequently. And TikTok was chosen as the digital space for activism because it has around 2.6 billion users globally and is already really wide known for its civic participation. TikTok also does a really good job at supporting its Black community, either through initiatives, accelerator programs, or partnerships with organizations. A researcher from Pew Research found that 58% of Black media users use the space for activism either through rallies or protests, profile pictures, or hashtags. And in the interviews that he did, he mentioned that a lot of his participants mentioned that they activate online because it draws attention to issues that typically aren't talked to in face-to-face life. And I was able to identify a gap because from what I found in previous works, a lot of articles did mention online activism and they did mention makeup inclusivity, but none of them were really tying the two together and examining the cause and impact or their relationships or what comes out of these. So to conduct my research, I am doing a qualitative content analysis, which can be described as a method where you're sampling media and visuals to determine if there are patterns. So in this case, I will be sampling media from the TikTok platform and then analyzing it to determine if there are patterns or trends that can be averaged in the quantitative data. I chose a sample size of 50 public TikToks, and these were identified through two main hashtags, shade inclusivity and inclusive beauty. These tags were chosen because they were the top trending on TikTok, which means that they will most likely give me a lot more videos to collect. And the sample size was chosen because I originally collected 75 videos, but a lot of my foundational sources on content analysis mentioned that when your data starts to repeat or you cannot identify any new patterns, then you don't have to continue. So I decided to cut it at 50 because I felt like that was a good spot. And my videos must fit criteria of being created by Black female content creators. They obviously must mention makeup and inclusivity, and the videos also must be created by a macro or mega TikToker. Mega TikTokers have 1 million followers or more, and macro is about 100K to 100 million. I chose these two because gathering videos from creators that have more followers will mean there's a lot more engagement. So example, if I was collecting videos from a video that had 50 likes and 3 comments compared to 1 million likes and 500 comments, there's a lot more data that I can actually analyze. And the videos that I collect will be coded deductively, which is basically where you set up your codes beforehand, and an inductive approach would be you basically create the codes as you go. And while that is really common, I did want to stick to a deductive based approach because I knew that I wanted to have a set structure, especially since I've never done a research project like this before. With that being said, I did create my own codebook, and while it is common to use another researcher's, I wanted to be able to make it as specific as possible. And since I've never created one, I refer to the Inter-University Consortium for Political and Social Research, which basically had an article called Guide to Code Books, and it literally led me through each step. This is a very small segment of my code book, but you can see it's focused on audience engagement. In the quantitative section, it's focused on the actual numerical values, so the number of likes, shares, saves, and views. And the qualitative section is focused on the sentiments, so positive, negative, and mixed. There are limitations with the content analysis, firstly being AI, because we all know it has absolutely skyrocketed in the past couple years, especially online. And this can lead to ethical dilemmas, copyright infringement, and just overall illegal activities. Even so, I'm not too worried about this one because TikTok does have a feature that will manually disclose videos as AI generated if it detects so. And also, time consumption was a really big limitation of mine because the content analysis I conducted was a very long process of identifying videos, making sure they fit the criteria, and then storing them correctly, which means I could have rushed and maybe there were certain videos that required a more thorough examination that I didn't get to. Even so, this content analysis is a very unobtrusive data collection. I'm not collecting any demographics like name or age, and all the data that I collect is public. So to analyze my results, the first thing I did was conduct a one-way ANOVA test, which can be described as basically where you're sampling categories and different groups to try to determine if there are statistically significant differences. ANOVA stands for Analysis of Variance, and as Ronald Fisher put it, who originally developed ANOVA, you're determining if there are significances, if they're actually important, or if they're just due to chance. So this will be done on the 4 identified marketing strategies: product demonstration, storytelling, brand critique, and educational content. And ANOVA will be testing the null hypothesis, which basically states that there are no statistical differences against the alternative hypothesis, which opposes the theory of the null. This is saying there are statistical differences. So I conducted 3 ANOVA tests that for the mean comments, mean likes, and mean shares. You can see that my p-values are all above 0.05, which Statology author Zach Bobbitt defines the p-value as an indication of how believable the null hypothesis is. So when it's above 0.05, that means there are no statistically significant differences, overall meaning that my alternative hypothesis was unsupported. And while that was mildly concerning for me, that doesn't mean that there aren't other factors that could indicate that there are patterns and relationships among the data that I collected. So the next thing I did was descriptive statistics. This table shows the mean engagement metrics by marketing strategy. So the first column is labeling each strategy, and then it has the mean likes, mean comments, and mean shares in numerical values. This is shown visually in figure 1, which you can see product demonstration is dominating in the average shares compared to the 3 other strategies. And figure 2 shows the average comments. Brand critique takes the lead here. It's not as drastic as a difference as figure 1 was, but it's still noticeable that it's generating a lot more comments. And then figure 3, you can see the average likes. Storytelling takes the lead here. Again, not as drastic as a difference, but still noticeable that this strategy is generating more likes. In addition to that, I also did sentiment analysis. So similar to my first table, there's marketing strategies and then the total number of videos for each strategy and percentage of comments that were positive, negative, and mixed. This is shown visually in a 100% stacked column chart where each column shows 100% of the data collected for that strategy. Positive is blue, negative is orange, and mixed is green. So for product demonstration, you can see 74% was positive, 16% negative. The negative was mainly comments expressing their concern for products that performed poorly on dark skin. And storytelling had 100% positive. The comments were they were promoting a lot of positive discussion, and overall they were really supportive of the stories that creators shared. Brand critique had the most balanced proportion with 31% positive, 38 negative, and 31 mixed. The negative was mainly comments either attacking the brand for their lack of inclusive products or attacking the creator for their critiques of the brands. And then lastly, educational content had 40% positive, 50% negative, and 10% mixed. The negative was mainly similar to brand critique. Comments were either attacking the creator for their education on the products or the brands, either saying that's not right or the research isn't correct, or supporting the creator but going against the brands for their lack of inclusive products. So that helped me to develop my new understanding, which was basically storytelling and product demonstrations generated a lot more supportive discussion because there was a theme of success in these strategies and overall positivity, whereas brand critique and educational content generated a lot more critical conversation because there's a theme of negativity and failure. The limitations of this result was that the sample size was limited to 2 hashtags, so this can have an impact on representation, and this can lead to possible selection bias because just because the tags that I chose were the top trending, that doesn't mean that there were other tags that would have been more impactful for my data or giving me more significant videos to collect. And then also the manual sentiment coding. And since I was the one that's deciding what's positive, what's negative, what's mixed, that can lead to a potential for researcher bias, especially without an intercoder reliability check like Cohen's kappa, which requires 2 coders. But since I didn't have 2 coders, it was unable to measure the consistency. And then, like I mentioned before, the risk of AI generated or inauthentic public TikTok data, because the media world is full of spam accounts, it's full of bots, and that can lead to a risk for potential falsified data and graphs, which could have an impact on my ANOVA results also. The implications were that authentic creator partnerships and success-based strategies are better at maximizing positive engagement over purely educational or critical content. And Black female creators using narrative-driven strategies to push for shading inclusivity directly supports the Fenty effect, where consumer pressure on social media can drive industry change. Future research could expand this project by firstly using a larger sample size, so maybe additional hashtags or platforms. This would really help with the representation. I recommend Instagram Reels or YouTube Shorts. And then also incorporating creator interviews. Since I did not do interviews, I focused on a content analysis, and I think this would overall increase qualitative depth because you would get to speak to the creators directly. And while that might be difficult to reach a good amount of creators that actually respond, which is why I didn't do it, I think if you stick to it, it would be a really nice addition to this topic. And then lastly, I recommend to explore the algorithmic influences with more depth, specifically because a lot of my foundational sources mention that there was evidence of platform bias. And what I mean by that is that there's actually a study conducted that Black creators actually might not receive as much engagement, or it might not reach as many algorithms due to racial factors. So I think diving into that would be really interesting. And in conclusion, we know that Black female TikTok creators advocate for makeup through 4 main strategies: product demonstration, storytelling, brand critiques, and educational content. And while no specific strategy showed statistically higher engagement volume, we do know that there was a theme of positive audience responses in personal narratives and strategies that had a more success-based theme. And overall, through the long process of this project, I learned that digital activism is reshaping beauty standards 1 shade at a time.
So how did the choices you made when designing or implementing your research method impact your research process?
So choosing to do a content analysis, I think while it was a more organized method for me to do, and it made the most sense for online media, I think that it also really impacted my ANOVA results because there was a lot of high in-group variability. So it was kind of difficult to determine significance because there could have been other factors like the length of the video or the time of day posted. And I think that could have, if I had included that, maybe it would have helped more, but also if I had focused on maybe a mixed method where I did do interviews, I think I would have gotten a lot more data as to why these strategies are used.
Okay, thank you.
How did the limitations of your method or data influence your new understanding?
So the limitations of my content analysis, like I mentioned before, mainly falsified data, or also just, like I mentioned, selection bias. So I think while my results were somewhat helpful, I think that my new understanding would have shifted if I had used other factors. Again, like you mentioned, I think maybe if I had used more hashtags and a larger platform, I think the new understanding that I developed would have been a lot bigger, not just focused on the strategies themselves.
Think back to the initial curiosity that sparked your inquiry. What other curiosities do you have, and how has this process prepared you to explore them?
So thinking back, like I mentioned, my future research, one of the first things I mentioned in the beginning of the year when we were doing our literature review and reading other studies was the platform bias. And I think that overall sparked me to develop what I decided to study, because that had kind of led me to realize, well, if there are factors that could indicate algorithm and based off the color of the skin, then there has to be ways that Black TikTokers are combating this. And while that would have been a little different than the process that I conducted, I think I decided that if I'm going to focus on algorithms and online activism, then I wanted to take it through a very specific approach. So I decided to focus on makeup inclusivity, because there's not a lot of talk of it online. And I think that really helped me understand just in general that there's a lot going on in the online world that people don't really know about in general in terms of activism.